Hello everyone. Today we're going to be discussing cybersecurity, and specifically we're going to be discussing cybersecurity from the viewpoint of the cyber kill chain. Now, the cyber kill chain is a framework or a way of looking at the anatomy of an attack, um, and it was created by Lockheed Martin. And this video is some generic guidelines as pertains to cybersecurity, but very often this word right here scares people, scares everybody. Like, oh, cybersecurity is a big fancy word. Yes, but no. I mean, I'm going to try to demystify it with this, and so because of that, it's going to be a lot more basic than it could be. But we'll go into that right here with the introduction to this video. Cybersecurity is important for everyone. Everyone from grandma to somebody who's extremely tech savvy. Just like it's important for you to have lock the doors on your house whenever you leave, it's just as important to make sure that you're safe on the internet because everybody uses the internet now. So we need to make sure that we're being being careful. And because of that, because it's necessary for everyone, I'm going to do this from a very non-technical standpoint. I'm not going to get too fancy with it. I will touch on some more advanced concepts, but I don't want you to be scared away from the concept of cybersecurity just because of the fact that you barely know how to turn on a computer. That's not the point here. I mean, if you were able to browse YouTube to find this video, then you need to know how to be good with cybersecurity. Like I said, there'll be some very simple concepts, and I'll look at it from a more advanced concepts. And that's another way of looking at that is for an individual who is not tech savvy, and also from a corporate environment that you might be able to actually apply some of these things. And this is a great quote that I think is very valuable. Um, you need to be able to break something down to the point where just about anybody can understand it. And obviously, some stuff is lost because of that, because a more technical explanation will have more detail to somebody who otherwise understands it, but you still need to make it where anybody can get it. So let's go into the way Lockheed Martin defines, you know, a hack, the the cyber kill chain by Lockheed Martin. There's 7 steps to this, and these are going to be steps that the bad actor, the evil person out there, is going to do against a target. First off, they're going to have to gather info about it. Gather info about the target. Reconnaissance. They need to know what it is that they're going to be attacking. You can't just go out there and swing a bat blindly and hope to hit something. You need to be able to take aim first. Then, weaponization. So, now that you know what it is that you're going to attack, you're going to create something that will specifically attack that. So, you're going to create the malware. Malware is a fancy word for virus or worm. There's a bunch of different types that do different things, but malware covers all of them. So they'll have to create something that will attack that target. Then they're going to have to get the malware to the target in some way, shape, form, or fashion. It just doesn't magically arrive. It has to get there somehow. Then they'll have to take advantage of something that's wrong with the way that the target was designed. There's vulnerabilities in most everything in a way that can then be exploited. You can then use that malware on the target. Finally, the malware has to be installed in some fashion on the target system, on the user system. There's different ways to say install, but in some way there needs to be a program running on the target system that wasn't there before, that is the bad actor is using. And then you'll have command and control, or C2, and that's where the bad guy, the human on the other end, is actually talking to the malware. This is, I think, very important that we kind of sometimes forget, is we just think that magically computer stuff happens. Computers are so smart that they just do whatever they want to do. And that's not really the case. You still have to have a human sitting behind the keyboard somewhere that came up with the idea on how to do whatever it is that they're wanting to do, on how they're trying to exploit whatever that they want to exploit. So this is, I think, a very important thing for people to understand, that the malware is going to be controlled by someone. It's just a puppet. It can do things on its own, but at some point in time, it will talk to the person who sent it, most likely. And finally, actions on objectives. You just got hacked. If you can stop the malware anywhere up to 7, you win. So I think one of the reasons why I really like this cyber kill chain that Lockheed Martin put out is that it gives you a lot of opportunities to be able to say, okay, if we can disrupt or disable or do whatever we can do to prevent the malware from continuing from step 2 to step 3 or step 3 to step 4, then you're going to stop it. And so if you can break it down and make it pretty granular, you can be able to understand more so what's going on. So let's jump into it, starting with number 1, reconnaissance. Just like what it sounds like. You got to have somebody out there looking on the internet, on the magical internets, to find what it is that they're trying to do, trying to find that they're going to do. Now, from a basic standpoint, these are going to be pretty standard for the slides. I'll talk about the individual or the more simple level first, and then I'll touch on some more complex concepts. But once again, this is not trying to get super technical. If you're a bad guy and you're driving around a neighborhood and you see an open Wi-Fi network, that is just a free game, pretty much. I mean, there is some places that offer open Wi-Fi, and that is often where you will have bad actors use the internet, is at a public library or something. So if you as an individual don't have a password protection on your Wi-Fi, that's a big problem, because at least those public libraries usually have something on the back end to be able to say that they can prevent bad things from happening. But if you just have your standard out-of-the-box router, or your little Wi-Fi box, whatever you want to call it, it's an access point if you want to get technical. But the point is that if your Wi-Fi does not have a password, that's a big problem. So make sure that you password protect your Wi-Fi. Assign a pretty strong password to it. It doesn't have to be something super crazy, but at the very least put a password on it, because that's going to make it much less of a target for somebody just driving around looking for someone to exploit. This is another one that I think is pretty interesting, is if they're driving around, not only will they look for open Wi-Fis, but they'll also look for Wi-Fis that just have the default network name. That's SSID is the fancy name, but the point is that when you look at the Wi-Fi, you see the name on it, that's the SSID. If you have what it would be a standardized name, then they will probably know that you're not tech savvy enough to be able to just change it. So if you can just change that name to something else, now don't change it to something like hack this, because then you're just going to oh yeah, I'm hacking now. Watch this. No, don't do that. And don't do like FBI surveillance, man. At least not in my opinion. Do something that is just pretty bland. You don't want to stand out from the crowd with your Wi-Fi. Now, if you live out in the country or something where there is only one Wi-Fi, well, it's pretty obvious. But at the same time, you don't want to attract attention to yourself. This is actually what I use. I use a misleading network name. So if you let's say if you have a Linksys router and you rename it to be a Belkin router or vice versa or something like that. So at least they think that they're trying to attack something that's not what it appears to be. So therefore, you're still flying under the radar, but you're also flying under the radar in a way that you look like you're a cat when you're actually a dog. So different methods attack different devices differently. So that's a pretty good idea. From a corporate standpoint, what they're going to do is if they're trying to attack a corporate network, they're going to first off try to gather email addresses and figure out the standardized name for your email addresses. Because if you have a work email, everybody's got first name dot last name at work.com or work.org. So they're going to try to gather email addresses and gather standardized email addresses and then figure out who works there. And then probably, maybe if they're really good, they're going to try to figure out who's the least tech savvy out of all of them and send that person an email. So anyway, if you're maintaining a business network, one of the things that you can always do to try to help your people out is to give an external message warning. see this pretty frequently, that if a message is coming from someone who's not inside of that corporation, that business, it sends a warning even in the message line that says, hey, this is coming from the outside, make sure you don't do anything that you shouldn't be doing. They can also take and just automatically scan your network. And this is where it gets a little bit more technical, and I'll try not to linger too much on this, but they will just scan your firewalls on the very outside of your network. They'll scan your ports, and they will see what's open that they can try to exploit. And then one of the ways that you can try to prevent this, not only the scanning of firewalls and ports, but other things, is you can even look online and you can see, hey, has anybody published any information about our network to say that these are the vulnerabilities? And then you can use access control lists or intrusion detection systems or intrusion protection systems. Just fancy software that is doing good on your side to counter that. We can get to that more later, but like I said, I don't want to get too technical about how that works and lose you in the weeds. Next step is going to be weaponization. You now know what it is you're attacking. You now need to figure out how to attack it. What's going to be the best way to do so? Are we going to go in with a sneaky attack with a dagger? Are we going to do just a big bolt attack with a mace? For lack of a better term. From an individual, generally speaking, when an exploit is found, they're not necessarily going to be focusing on attacking you. They're just trying to attack anybody who's vulnerable. And they just kind of take a shotgun approach. Let's just shoot out there and see what we hit. So if this is a really big concern, and I actually have an older relative of mine who does this, just use a less common operating system. So everybody uses Windows. So what do all the hackers try to attack? Windows. So Mac devices, Apple OS devices, are safer partially because of the fact that Apple locks those down more, but they're also kind of a less customizable and a less vulnerable. So if that's a concern, not saying that there is not malware for Apple, because there is, but it's a harder thing to attack because Windows is just a lot more flexible. So, and if you really want to get crazy, and this is the relative that I have, he's using Linux. So he's using his home desktop computer runs Linux. That is almost, it's just much harder to find something that's going to attack it because nobody uses it. And so if you're not a focused target, they're not going to write viruses that are going to infect Linux, generally speaking. They're going to try to infect you with a virus that's meant for a Windows machine, and then it'll just fail. So one way that you can try to protect yourself or someone who is really not tech savvy is just use a less common OS. One thing that you definitely need to keep in mind from a corporate environment, and if you're anywhere near tech savvy on this, is you'll know this: the more valuable the target, the more persistent the threat. I mean, absolutely, 100%. If you are working for, some mom and pop shop in the middle of nowhere, it's not likely that anybody, one, even knows that you exist, and two, will be willing to target you. You're kind of more up here, just the individual. But if you're working for the U.S. government or something, or for a large company that everybody knows about, like Amazon, oh yeah, they're absolutely going to keep trying to find ways to get in. If there's some sort of an even more political reason to do so, like they claim to have done with the recent Twitch hack, then they're absolutely going to just keep trying to get in. So you're just going to need to have to stay on top of it and know what's going to be most effective against you. There's just a general broad statement here. There's so many more ways that you can be specific about it, but just know that the bigger the target you are, well, the bigger the target you are. And make sure that you know your own systems very well. Make sure that not only you know what your systems are, but you also have a well-designed system. That's something that you need to work with your IT department. You need to have a good internal layout of your IP addresses, so that if something says, hey, this IP address is acting weird, you not just look like a deer in the headlights and be like, I don't know where that's at. You need to be able to have a map of your own system. You say, oh yeah, I know exactly where that's at. It's on floor 3, room 206, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, moving on. Next, now that you have identified your target and you've made a weapon to attack it, you need to get that to the target. From an individual standpoint, once again, pretty basic, mass emails. If you get the email claiming to be a Nigerian prince, don't do it. If you have websites, I just saw one of these today. If you have websites where the spelling is horrendous, it is likely to be a fraud. You can just, if you're in it long enough and you just look at it, you can realize that something's hinky. So therefore, if you get that weird email, just don't click on the link. If you get an email from Amazon saying that your account has been compromised, don't click on the link. Open up Chrome, open up Firefox, open up Edge, and manually go to the website and log in, because that link may take you to a website that looks like Amazon and is actually getting you to enter in your username and your password, or that looks like it belongs to your bank, and then they just stole your username and your password and took all your money. So if you are concerned, which it's valid to be concerned, just open it up and go through the way you normally would. Pick up the phone and call the phone number not in the email, but check Google and then call the phone number. Remember that everything in that email is likely to be a lie, so don't use anything from there. This one is huge as well. This is the way that it's huge. Unknown USBs. Unknown USBs can very easily contain malware, can very easily contain viruses. You just plug that into your system and boom, you're done. So don't plug in an unknown USB that you found lying on the bench in the park. Like, just don't do it. It's not worth it. It's absolutely not worth it. Um, the U.S. government has effectively used this as a form of warfare against the Iraqs. If you want to look it up, look up the Iranian power plant. I'm sorry, the Iranian power plant. We just threw a bunch of USBs down there, and we ended up creating a virus that somebody plugged in the USB, and it destroyed a nuclear power plant. So don't plug in weird USBs, please. From a corporate standpoint, a lot of the same ways. You really can't get that fancy with how you're going to get the malware to the target. It has to get there somehow. It has to get there through an attachment in an email, somebody clicking on something weird in a website. Once again, unknown USBs. That's just super common. Somebody gets curious. You have to know what's on there. Curiosity killed the cat. Don't touch it. So you need to educate your employees on all those different things. Another one that's kind of unique, that gets a little bit more specific if you are a more high value target, is what's called spear phishing. So there's phishing attacks, and they just try to make you give up your credentials. You might know what that is, but it's phishing spelled with a PH. So they're trying to get you to give up credentials. Spear phishing is the term for when they are being very specific and targeted to try to get you to give up information. For example, they may know a lot of information about your company, about you, that can be found out online, and they will send that person an email pretending to be a vendor or a customer or something, and they will then try to get them to go to a website. And oftentimes, you won't get the weird stuff that you would recognize up here with these suspicious websites. It'll look really legit. Their English will be really good. You won't be able to find the mistakes. So be wary of that, and that's a much harder thing to prevent those spear phishing attacks. Just know that they can be out there, and educate your people, and hopefully you'll stay fairly safe. Now that we have gotten the malware to the target, you need to do something with it. Just, congratulations, you're outside the front door, but, the house is all locked down. All the doors are locked, all the windows are closed. There's a good security system in place. Well, how do you get in? Well, this is where people who are way smarter than me have found exploits, the most recent of which is Log4j, and they have found the ways that you can then get into the house. The burglar found an open window. Okay, let's go in. Oh, we found an unlocked back door. Let's go in. Oh, we figured out how to pick the lock for this kind of a target. You know what I'm saying? Those sorts of things. It's like, oh, we know how to shim this on this kind of window to be able to get in. That's where the recon comes in on these things, and why you have to weaponize an attack that will be specific to that target, because there's a lot of different kinds of computer programs out there, and there's ways that they can exploit those. One of the big ways that they do this is that these outdated systems, the longer a system is out, the more time people have to tinker with it and to see where it'll break. And when they figure out how it breaks, they can then write the malware to attack that. So, contrary to popular belief, please update your systems. Like 99% of the time, it's going to be better to update than to not update. So when you see that new iOS update, push it forward. When you see that new Windows update, push it forward. It's not going to break your system. It's going to fix your system. So I'm not going to lie, I used to be on the other side of the fence. I have turned around, I've been educated, and I now know the fact that when you do this, you need to keep all of your stuff up to date because you are much, 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 much less likely to be attacked if you keep it up to date. Start it at night. Make sure that automatic updates are turned on. Just do it right before you go to bed. Whatever the case may be, just keep it up to date. Another one that's real simple, you can get into the house if you have the key. So don't lose the key. Don't don't let somebody else have your key. What are the things to keep in mind when we're talking about a username? What is commonly a username for most logins? It's your email address. So if you log into one website that's, ilovepuppies.com, and you're like, oh, it's just I Love Puppies, it's not a super secure website, I don't care about it, and you use your little 3-character password, your initials, to log in, and your username is your full name, then if the ilovepuppies.com gets hacked, they now know that at least on one website you use that password because they've now gathered that information. Well, maybe you use that password and email address for your bank. Okay, now that's a problem. So you can't, that's why they tell you not to reuse stuff, because usually the username is the email and the password is the same. So if the chain is only as strong as the weakest link. Maybe your bank has got really good encryption and has never been hacked. That doesn't matter if ilovepuppies.com gets hacked. So this is so hard to do without a password manager nowadays, and I would highly recommend the use of one, because the password manager just makes it where all you have to do is remember one password. That password is extremely difficult, if not near impossible, to be attacked by bad actors because it's saved physically on your system, so they'd have to get your computer, which is much less likely than just getting your email and password through an online account. And then it'll create a random string of characters that's near unbreakable. And even if it is broken, it's not a big deal because it's unique to that place. I would highly recommend for everyone to use a password manager. It just makes life so much easier for you because you don't have to remember it. One, and two, just so much harder for the bad guys to get in. I would recommend, not that they're paying for this or anything. You could use LastPass, 1Password. There's all different kinds out there. Do some search. I'm not going to recommend what I use just because of the fact that I want to keep this pretty neutral. But use a password manager. Even Chrome is good, but that's still not as good as a pure true password manager that you might have to pay $20 a month for. Well, you pay what, $8 a month for Netflix. You can fork up $2 a month for your password manager. Just my 2 cents. From a corporate standpoint, there is such a thing as a zero-day exploit. And we kind of are in the middle of that right now with the Log4j, but it's not really because of the fact that somebody was nice enough to say, hey, there's this exploit out there, you need to fix it. And then it's now a race from the people who are trying to protect their systems and the people trying to get into the systems. So it's not technically a zero-day exploit because of the fact that the bad guys found out about it at the same time as the good guys. A zero-day exploit means nobody knows about it. Bad guys are good guys, and the bad guys use it to get into and break something. So to be fair, doing your software updates and security patches isn't going to protect you there, but that's why there's a problem. You can still stop, because remember you've got those 7 steps. Even if they get in with the zero-day exploit, that doesn't mean they have all the data. So there should be a way for your users, for your company, to be able to report suspicious activity. Like, hey, this was weird. I was working with my computer. Now, granted, you're going to get a lot of information. Like, my computer's running slow. Well, that might be the only clue. So you probably should look into it and figure out why their computer's running slow and see if it's because of the fact that they have 10 million tabs open in Chrome, or if it's because of the fact that, oh, there is something weird going on here. I need to dig into this a little deeper. So that's just the curse of IT. Just have a way for your people to tell you that, hey, something weird is going on, and don't punish them for that. Just be like, hey, thanks, appreciate it. It's up and running again. Oh, okay, thanks. If all it is closing their, 100 Chrome tabs, tell them not to do it again. But maybe next time when it is running slow, like I didn't open up all the Chrome tabs, but it's still running slow. And you're like, huh, oh yeah, it is running slow. Looks like you got malware. Oh. And the point is yeah, I'm done with that. Next, installation. You now have figured out how to get into the computer system. Now you need to install a program that will run on there. And install is a broad word, and I'm going to talk about different ways that we can view the installation. From an individual standpoint, like I said, installed. Installed, you think of double clicking on an exe, and then it says, do you want to install? And then you click on the OK, and then it installs. That's not always the case, but that's the way it usually happens. Usually. From an individual standpoint, just don't install unknown programs. Don't download that weird stuff from the internet that's going to do something, and make sure you install it. Make sure you got a good antivirus as well. But also just in general, don't install that weird stuff. Another way that you can partially protect yourself from this is don't have the main account that you use for your computer be an admin account. Windows has gotten pretty good about this on their own, but it still can help for you to just have a user account, and then you can only upgrade to admin rights, and it will prompt you for that password. You can type in that password, and that's a more secure way of doing things if you need to. But now when it does that whole boom pop up and you get the little shield, that's Windows' way of kind of solving that it kind of locks down the admin rights. Linux is really good about this, and that's why it's really hard to hack Linux, is because they really care about who has admin rights and who doesn't. But just in general, just don't install unknown programs in the first place. From a corporate standpoint, one of the ways that you can get a program to run on a system without the installation is by using PowerShell or scripts. If you don't know what PowerShell and scripts are, that's fine. Just make sure that you disable them because you're clearly not using them and they can be used for bad stuff. If you are using PowerShell and scripts, consider having some sort of a rule on your system that will limit the times when they can be used. For example, if everybody goes home at 5, turn off all PowerShell. Everybody goes home at 5 and doesn't come in until 8. Well, turn off all PowerShell potential at 5:30 and don't turn it on until 7:30. So therefore, you just lock down the system during those off hours when people would try to be doing stuff, and you just protect the system more. Those are some thoughts. Those are some ways that you can do it, but just the general idea from that standpoint is to limit the system enough to where it's more secure, but not to the point where it restricts the user unnecessarily. Just lock all that exterior stuff down. Lock down those open ports. Lock down the PowerShell. Lock down the scripts. Don't let it be used if it's not otherwise being used, because somebody's going to use it for something that they shouldn't be using it for. Now we get to command and control, C2. This is kind of one of my favorite ones. I recently took an online course that kind of really explained a lot of what's going on with C2, and it's just fascinating to me, like the way that you can find this, because the malware has to phone home. Malware got there with the internet, so therefore it's going to need to communicate with the internet still. If you're a home user, you really shouldn't worry about this too much. This is kind of more from a corporate standpoint, but still just keep in mind that the malware's got to get there somehow. So if you're not using your internet, like let's say you're going on vacation and you don't have any cameras or anything, just unplug your internet. Like, they can't hack your internet if it's not there. So just a thought to keep in mind. If you're just going to be gone for a while, just straight up unplug that router. Don't need it. You're going to save a little bit of electricity, and you're also going to keep yourself more secure. From a corporate standpoint, it gets pretty fancy. Pretty much all your malware is going to talk to who sent it before it does anything serious on the system. I mean, granted, you have malware on your system, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they got anything accomplished. And so, if you're really good at this, you can really stop, and this is your last line of defense. You got to stop it, Because as we go back before, you may never be able to stop that one user from clicking on that weird link in that email or by plugging that USB in. That almost will never be able to be stopped. Almost. But if you can, you still have a chance to stop the malware from doing what it needs to be done if you can choke point your internet traffic. If you, where reasonable and possible, this is kind of because you want redundancy in your own networks. You want that mesh instead of that star. But the star is really good for security, but it's really not great for redundancy. Where possible, choke point it. And definitely log packet data, all the packets and all that stuff coming through those choke points. There's a lot of stuff out there that can help you with this. Rita, if you've never heard of that, is one of them. It's free, completely free, and it's a really good way that you can analyze that data and find the malware before it does anything that it shouldn't be doing. So look into Rita, look into other possible software. There are paid solutions, there's free solutions. There's just ways to protect yourself. Finally, actions on objectives. Bum bum bum. You just got hacked. That's it. It's over, right? Just throw up your hands, walk away. Not quite. I mean, never truly give up the fight. From an individual standpoint, just know that whatever you got infected with is probably going to try to keep infecting stuff. So, just as a general rule, disconnect that computer from the internet. There are exceptions, but if you aren't on the phone with a professional, just disconnect it. Maybe not shut it down. What you could do is if you had some stuff on there that you didn't want to lose, some of those important photos, you could plug a USB or an external hard drive in there, copy that off onto there, but for the love, do not plug that into anything else. Take that USB or that external hard drive to a professional and say, hey, I've got a virus on here, but I also have, photos of my recently deceased grandma. Like, can you get the photos off and not get the virus off? And they should be able to do that. But don't just think that you can copy them onto the USB and then put them on another. You just infected the second computer. So just try to keep that malware contained as much as possible. From a corporate standpoint, once again, it's going to want to spread, but it's going to want to spread to affect everything. So just because you have, an endpoint, a user's computer infected does not mean that your server's infected yet. So just try to isolate that and then see how far it's gone. Make sure that if you do have backups, that those are safe and secure. That should already have been done before this point, but just for a sanity check, you might want to make sure that is good to go. You're just damage control. Whatever your policies and procedures say, hopefully you got something in place that allows you to limit what should be infected, and then phone a friend. There's people out there that definitely make their living doing this stuff, smarter than I am, and they can help you and advise you in ways. Hopefully your business is willing to pay for it. Hopefully you don't get hit with ransomware, and you're looking at the possibility of paying the ransom or not. I vote don't, but that's going to be up to you. If you're paying the ransom, you're just funding their further operations and encouraging them to keep going. But you got to do what you got to do. Just know that just because something's infected does not mean that it's game over. There's still ways to take action. There's still ways to prevent further loss. Hopefully that made sense to everyone. So let's see if we can wrap this up now. Cybersecurity starts with the person behind the keyboard who's using the computer. It absolutely starts there. It doesn't end there, but it starts there. And so if you can have people who are at least somewhat savvy at the issues facing cybersecurity, it shouldn't be a big scary word. Can't say this enough. Keep your software up to date. Keep Windows up to date. Keep everything up to date. Whatever software that you use, periodically check it for new security patches, new updates, and update it. You really need to have a lot of different systems, and that's what I really like about, like I said, the cyber kill chain. Is you've got all those steps, And so, as you're thinking through the way that you're going to defend, from a corporate standpoint, your network, you need to figure out how to detect, deny, disrupt, deceive. I mean, honeypot. You could put a honeypot in your system. Honeypots, I think, would be hilariously fun because basically you're just making it look like, oh, this is where the cool stuff is. And so if the malware gets in, oh no, you're infected, it then goes into the honeypot and it sends you notification you got malware in your system. Oh, sweet. They think that they're stealing important information and they're actually stealing nothing and they just let you know that they're there. There's so many different ways that you can protect your system against bad actors if and all you got to do is break that chain at one spot. So just try to have different ways to work at each level of the chain. Like I said, break the chain. These are the references that I use for this. Um, the main one was Lockheed Martin. SANS, another great resource if you want to dive more into this. Um, if this is something that is really interesting to you, they are the industry leaders on this. And then the IEEE Computer Society, been around for a long time, also very knowledgeable on these type of topics. If this interests you, I would highly recommend going to their website and seeing their white paper, seeing what they published. I think it's very, very interesting. I really think it's important as well that we can get everybody from grandma to the CEOs to be more cybersecurity savvy. Because if we can do that, then we're defeating the bad guys, and they don't get to have all of our info. So, thank you for watching, and have a great day.